and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras, here with ILTV's morning briefing.
Violence erupted along the Gaza border early this morning. Palestinians from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror group attempted to injure IDF troops with an improvised explosive device disguised as a pair of wire cutters. The army detected and destroyed the IED with no injuries reported. Further, IDF tanks have just shelled an Islamic Jihad outpost in the Strip in retaliation for the failed attack. At this time, at least 2 members of Islamic Jihad have been killed in the blast, and this exchange of fire is, of course, just the latest in a string of violence along the border. This weekend saw thousands of Gazans gathering at the border to protest Israel's ongoing blockade of the Strip. Though these protests have downsized considerably from what we saw during the Hamas-sponsored March of Return protest over the last few months, Israeli security forces have remained on their toes regardless. Unrest in the Strip has peaked in the wake of United States President Trump's decision to relocate the American embassy to Jerusalem earlier this month. That rage has boiled over into countless infiltration attempts. Gazans are also continuing to fly homemade firebombs over the border into Israel using paper kites. Firefighters spent much of this weekend attempting to put out multiple fires in southern Israel from such attacks, after the blazes spiraled out of control, fanned by the intense summer heat. After fighting for his life in the hospital, an IDF soldier from the elite Duvdevan unit has just succumbed to his wounds sustained in the line of duty and passed away. Sergeant Ronen Lubarsky was part of a team conducting overnight arrests in a Palestinian refugee camp in the West Bank last Thursday. During the raid, a Palestinian suspect dropped a marble slab on his head from up high. Sergeant Lubarsky was quickly rushed to the hospital, where doctors struggled for 2 days to resuscitate him. Hundreds of Israeli citizens turned out for Sergeant Lubarsky's funeral, held late last night at the Mount Herzl Military Cemetery in Jerusalem. Members of his unit praised the 24-year-old's bravery throughout his service, with Israeli leaders offering their sorrow. The Duvdevan unit is an elite corps of IDF soldiers trained for making terror-related arrests in dangerous, often covert conditions. This year alone, Duvdevan soldiers have arrested over 150 Palestinian suspects on terror charges. Sergeant Lubarsky is the 18th soldier killed while serving in Duvdevan since the unit was created over 20 years ago, though notably one of the only ones killed by an enemy. An IDF manhunt is currently underway to track down those responsible for Sergeant Lubarsky's death. An investigation has now been opened by the Justice Ministry's Police Internal Investigations Department into allegations of police brutality in the Israeli Bedouin town of Rahat. The issue began when police claimed that dozens of residents in the Rahat area attacked them while they were carrying out a traffic stop. 2 officers were hospitalized and 2 suspects were arrested. But in a recently released video of the incident, a plainclothes officer appears to be slapping one of the suspects in custody. Further, Israeli Arab residents in the area say the police accounts of the event are lies. One of the suspect's uncles, who was there at the protest, said, quote, "There was a disagreement between an officer and the suspect's brother, and when bystanders heard the officer's rude comments about his mother, the situation got heated, and it had nothing to do with the suspect himself," end quote. Witnesses from Rahat went on to say that the incident was indicative of systemic discrimination against Israeli Arabs, and that the police have 2 faces. Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan has supported the investigation, tweeting that, quote, "There's no justification for police using unwarranted force, and that there would be no leniency to violent officers." After additional information has been given to police by former advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu Nir Hefetz, the police have announced that they plan to question Netanyahu for the 10th time on June 12th. At least 2 to 3 more rounds of questioning are also expected. Hefetz, who has turned state's witness, has allegedly given further proof pertinent to cases 1000, 2000, and especially 4000, in which he supposedly played a central role. Case 4000, aka the Bezek probe, looks into a supposed quid pro quo agreement between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Shaul Elovitch. Netanyahu allegedly planned to advance legislation favorable to Elovich's communications company Bezekam, and in return, Elovitch would push more favorable coverage of Netanyahu in his news station Walla. Hefetz claims to have been in daily contact with Elovitch regarding this arrangement. He has also allegedly pointed to other evidences of corruption, and wife Sarah Netanyahu and son Yair are also allegedly involved to different degrees. The Prime Minister's office has already stated that Hefetz's comments are completely false, and the Netanyahu family has continued to maintain innocence. Well, the royal wedding may be over, but the UK's royal family is set to make history yet again next month. Prince William will be visiting Israel for 3 days in the end of June, the first ever state visit by a member of British royalty since the time of the British Mandate more than 70 years ago. This trip is part of a region-wide tour, and Prince William will begin his journey in Jordan before flying to Tel Aviv on June 25th. He'll then remain in the country until the 28th, during which time he will also visit Palestinian leaders in Ramallah. Prime Minister Netanyahu hailed this historic trip when it was first announced back in March. While this is the first official state visit from a member of British royalty, other members of Her Majesty's family have been to Israel in the past. Prince Charles actually visited Israel twice, for Rabin's funeral in '95 and the funeral of Shimon Peres in 2016. Additionally, this visit comes at a time when the UK's influence in Middle East affairs is becoming increasingly unclear. The United Kingdom will soon withdraw from the EU, making this visit seemingly something of an attempt to retain influence in the region. Still, though England often butts heads with Israel over political matters, the UK holds massive business ties with Israeli firms, which reached nearly $7 billion in trade last year. So either way, Israelis are mostly just excited to finally catch a glimpse of a real-life prince in the flesh.
That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.